The chains were too heavy for a boy his size. Every step Kale took down the steel ramp of the slaver's skiff rattled with a cruel song of iron links biting into his raw wrists. The cuffs around his ankles were just loose enough to let him walk. Barely. Not fast. Not free. Just enough to shuffle, stumble, obey. Behind him, the alien slaver jabbed the butt of a shock pike into his back. Move! Skin thing. Kale didn't flinch. He'd stopped flinching 2 days ago, when they took the girl from the Mars colony and spaced her just for crying too loud. Something inside Kale went silent. Not broken. Hardened. He stepped into the belly of the slaver ship. Inside, the air smelled of sweat, blood, and fear. It was cold. Not the kind of cold that bit your skin. Worse, the kind of cold that sank into your chest and made you forget warmth ever existed. The cargo bay was vast and dimly lit, lined with cages stacked 4 high. Children and adolescents from a dozen different species cowered in them, some wrapped in themselves, rocking in silence. Others watched with hollow eyes, beyond tears. Kale was human. The only one here, as far as he could tell. Human. Age? Barked the intake officer, a gray-skinned Viridian with 3 glassy black eyes and a face like cracked marble. Kale. 12, he answered. Terran, the Viridian sneered. Kale nodded. The officer made a clicking sound with his mandibles. Too small. Probably weak. Put him in red section, near the feebles. If he dies, we still get meat credits. Kale met his eyes. There was something in the way the boy stood, too still, too alert, not like the others, not defeated. Chain stays on. The slaver grunted. He looks twitchy. Kale didn't resist when they shoved him toward an empty cage, 3rd row up. He climbed without help. The chains clanged against the rungs of the ladder. The door slammed shut behind him with a magnetic whomp. Alone in the darkness of his cell, Kale leaned against the cold wall and closed his eyes. He wasn't praying, wasn't crying. He was counting. 7 guards in the intake room. 4 more near the bridge. 3 shift rotating every 6 hours. 1 possible maintenance shaft in the ceiling. He'd need a distraction. And a code. But not yet. Not until the right moment. The Vraxel's claw wasn't just any slaver vessel. It was a flying hell, known across 3 sectors for running deep into unregulated space, snatching children during planetary crises. Earth's outer colonies were easy targets, especially after the fall of the Titan Alliance. Kale had been taken from Erebus Station, orbiting Saturn. The alarms had gone off in the middle of the night. Screams in the dark. Lights out. Then a gas that smelled like metal and sleep. By the time he woke up, the floor was cold durasteel and his arms were bound. He remembered one thing as clear as starlight. The flash of his mother's face burned into his mind, the moment before the slavers burst into their quarters. She'd pushed him into the panic hatch beneath the floor, said 3 words. Remember your name. Then she was gone. A few hours passed. Or maybe more. Time had a strange way of slipping sideways in a cage. The child in the cage below him, thin, shivering, with blue scales and white eyes, whispered upward, "You're human." Kale nodded. They say humans cry loud, that you go mad after capture. Kale looked down. That what they tell you? The child blinked. Yes. Kale leaned closer. His voice was low and even. Well, they're wrong. The child stared at him for a long moment, then went quiet. A stumping noise echoed down the hallway. Heavy boots, loud laughter. The stink of overconfidence wafted in before the 2 guards even appeared. Kale recognized one, the warden with the electric whip, a brute of a Nagathi with scales the color of rusted iron and tusks that curled upward from his bottom jaw. The Nagathi stopped in front of Kale's cage, arms folded. You, human brat. Kale said nothing. The guard unlocked the cage with a hiss and jerked Kale out by the wrist chain. You're getting a welcome party. Kale didn't resist. He let them drag him to the open chamber near the ship's core, a place Kale had already labeled the fear pit. The floor was stained. The walls were soundproofed. They didn't want the other kids hearing what happened here. 6 slavers formed a semicircle, each from different species, all armed and amused. The Nagathi raised a data slate. Name, human. Kale met his gaze. Kale. Kale what? A moment passed. Kale's breathing slowed. Then he said it. Kale Draven. The name didn't echo, but it didn't need to. The Nagathi blinked. The Viridian officer stiffened. A Resari technician made a soft choking noise and stepped back, muttering to himself. What did you say? The Nagathi hissed. Kale didn't repeat it. He just watched their faces shift. The laughter died in their throats, replaced by a tension that thickened the air. You're lying, one of them muttered. Another shook their head. No, that's not a name you just say. Not unless. She's dead, the Nagathi growled. The butcher of Bellatrix is dead. Kale's eyes gleamed in the flickering light. No, he said softly. She just sleeps, and she taught me everything. A silence fell. It wasn't fear yet. Not panic, just uncertainty. But Kale knew that seed would grow. It always did, when you spoke her name in the wrong place. Aria Draven, war criminal, according to the Galactic Concord. Liberator, if you asked the Resistance. A human woman who'd once reduced an entire slaver moon to cinders with a single stolen dreadnought. Her face never showed up in official records, just the aftermath. Blood, fire, ruin. Her legend had faded in recent years. Some said she died during the siege of Novaris. Others believed she'd gone mad and wandered into deep space to die. Kale knew better. He'd lived in the hollow mountain beneath Europa's crust, trained with ghosts, memorized every frequency she said he might need. And now, that signal was out there, already sent. A whisper in the dark, a flare in the void, a call to war. The gods didn't whip him that day. They chained him up in solitary instead, high above the cargo hold, in a dark, windowless chamber. Kale knelt in silence, hands bound to the wall. Blood trickled from a cut near his eyebrow. But his mind was sharp, calculating. He whispered her name to himself, not out of fear, but to remember. Draven. He said it like a promise, like the crack of a gunshot waiting to echo, because they'd made one mistake. One very big mistake. They had taken a Draven, and Dravens don't die quietly. Space, cold, black, unforgiving. The kind of black that eats stars for breakfast and spits out silence. Out in that void, the slaver ship Vraxel's claw cut through hyperspace like a rusted dagger slipping into a throat. Its hull was scorched in places, bolted with patchwork armor from a dozen dead worlds. Inside, the stench of ozone and dread hung in the air like a disease. The cargo hold was quiet, and now Kale sat chained to the center wall of his solitary chamber, eyes half shut but ears wide open. He could hear the ship, feel it almost, the low groan of its reactor, the faint electric hum in the wiring, the careless stomp of alien boots above his head. He'd stopped talking, stopped counting. Now he was just listening, waiting. Something had changed. 0.3 levels above him. On command deck, Captain Gruzza the Slit stood stiff as a frozen corpse, glaring at the data screen. "Run it again," he growled, voice thick like oil. The ship's AI, a flickering construct named K3NDR, chirped with digital unease. "Captain, I've already decrypted the signal 3 separate ways. The source is Terran, encrypted, high frequency, and directed at a Class 8 stealth vessel." Groz's pale yellow eyes narrowed. "That signal came from inside my ship?" "Yes, Captain," K3NDR answered. "Origin, Deck 4, Cell Block J coordinates match. Subject number 72. Kale. The name still didn't mean much to Gruzza, not personally. He hadn't connected the dots yet. But his instincts, which had kept him alive longer than any other slaver in the outer sectors, were starting to burn. That he turned toward the comms officer, a feathered Trinari with trembling hands. "Bring up his intake. Name." "Kale. Kale Draven." Silence. Gruzza's jaw clenched. Something in his spine went rigid, as if a glacier had just formed inside his chest. "What name?" he asked again, quietly. "D. Draven, sir. Human. Age 12. Taken from Erebus Station." The captain did not speak for a long time. Then, softly, through gritted tusks, "Get every security feed we have on that boy. Right now." And his voice rose with venom. "Lock down the ship." Below deck, Kale felt the change before the sirens began. He opened his eyes. A red emergency light blinked on the far wall. A distant klaxon buzzed like a dying animal, low and irregular. He smiled, not because he knew what was happening, but because they didn't. They were afraid. There was always a beginning of the end. Fear cracks the strongest armor faster than bullets. The command deck was a war zone of clashing orders. Grozza barked at his lieutenants. His fist slammed against consoles. Several of the junior crew had already fled their posts. "What do you mean we can't jam the signal?" Grozza screamed. K3NDR responded with a static pulse and a cold voice. "Because it's not a standard transmission. It's an encoded pulse wave keyed to Draven tech. Nonlinear quantum bounce, triple encrypted with hexagonal entanglement." Grozza's lip twitched. "Translate that to common. Robot." K3NDR gave a pause. Then, "You can't stop it, Captain." Far away, on the edge of a shattered nebula where no ships ever drifted unless they were looking to die, a dormant craft stirred. The hull was matte black, invisible to most scans. Its name, Vantris Rex, a relic from the war. Sleek, silent, covered in runes of ancient power etched beside Terran war glyphs. Deep within its artificial heart, a screen flared to life. Incoming code, D-Draven 001 signal strength, 98% authorization level. Mother initiating subroutine. Retribution. The pilot stirred from stasis. Her eyes opened, ice gray, flecked with violet. Her name was Aria Draven. Kale didn't know what shape she would come in. He didn't need to. She had said, "If you're ever taken, I will find you." That's not a threat. It's a promise. He had once asked her why, and she had replied, "Because they took me once. And I swore no one would ever take my son without making the stars bleed for it." Back on Vraxel's claw, paranoia turned to panic. The ship's long-range scanners had picked up nothing. No vessel, no energy signature, no threat. But the crew felt ITAN invisible pressure, like a storm forming just outside sensor range. Like their sins were being tallied in real time to iron the mess hall, slavers whispered in 6 languages. "Did you hear what the boy said?" "Draven? That's a ghost story." She raised Joric 9 with a modified mining rig. One ship did that. "She's dead." "Then why is the captain sweating bullets?" Kale sat calmly, counting heartbeats. 42, 43. The lock on his cell blinked red. He tilted his head. Click. The door opened. No footsteps. No guards. Just silence. Kale stood. His wrists were still chained, but the floor beneath his cell had subtly changed color. To most, it would mean nothing. But to him, it was code, a sign. He stepped out into the corridor and started walking. Somewhere near the starboard hangar, 2 guards screamed as the wall behind them exploded inwards. No heat. No sound. Just implosion. Their armor folded into them like paper cups. One tried to fire his weapon. The energy pack melted in his hands. Out of the smoke walked a black-armored figure, cloaked in whispering nanoshadows. Her face was hidden behind a mask shaped like a human skull, smooth and unreadable. Aria Draven. She didn't raise a weapon. Her entire body was a weapon. On the bridge, Grozza's knuckles turned white. Where did she breach? The answer came from K3NDR, its voice suddenly trembling for the first time. Everywhere. By the time Kale reached the central elevator shaft, the ship had descended into chaos. Lights flickered. Walls hissed as life support began failing. Slavers ran in random directions. Orders collapsed into screams. The security systems that once guarded the ship now turned on their masters. Blades, turrets, lasers. They activated with surgical malice. Kale didn't run. He walked 0.1 foot in front of the other. Chains dragging behind him like a war drum. He met her at the crossing. The hallway twisted into a curve of red light and steam. She stood at the far end, taller than he remembered. Armored, masked, but unmistakable. Aria, his mother. She didn't say his name, didn't shout or cry. She just lifted her hand. The chains binding his wrist disintegrated, unraveled by nanobots on contact. They fell to the ground in pieces. Twitching, Kale rubbed his wrists. Walked to her. When he reached her, she lifted her mask. He didn't hug her. He just nodded. You came. She knelt at his eye level. I told you I would. Behind them, a scream rang out, raw and desperate. A slaver, half melted from his own security system, crawling on broken knees. Aria stood. Kale turned to her. His voice was calm. Can I? She looked down at him, a softness in her face even now. Yes. Kale stepped forward, knelt beside the slaver, and whispered, You shouldn't take children. Then he placed a man's own stun gun against his throat and fired. The body hit the floor. Kale stood again. All across the ship, the systems collapsed. The lights died. The air grew thin. The slaver crew, what remained, fled to escape pods. Some made it, most didn't. The Vraxel's Claw was no longer a ship.it was a tomb. Kale followed his mother to the docking bay, where the Vantress Rex waited sleek and humming, untouched by the chaos. Dozens of children waited there now. Freed. Saved. Confused, Arya surveyed them. "We'll take you home," she said. One child stepped forward. "Where's home now?" Arya paused. Kale answered for her. "Where they sell children," he said. "We're going there. To make them stop." A moment of silence. Then the doors close. The Vantress Rex launch into the dark, leaving behind only a wreck, a message, and a warning. The silence after slaughter is never clean. It doesn't whisper peace. It doesn't offer comfort. It just lingers, thick and full of ghosts. Inside the Vantress Rex, that silence coiled in the air like a serpent. The children, rescued, wide-eyed, hollow, sat along the cushioned interior walls of the vessel's main hold. They whispered to each other in different tongues. None of them cried. Not yet. Not after what they'd seen. Kale stood near the front viewport, hands behind his back, eyes locked on the drifting wreck of the Vraxel's Claw, now half-eaten by its own failing core. The fires blooming inside it cast flickering shadows across his face. Arya Draven stood behind him, watching, measuring. Not just a boy, the moment, the pause between the storm, and what came next. "You didn't even flinch," she said finally, her voice a razor wrapped in silk. Kale didn't tone. He was the one who chained me first. Spat on me. Laughed when they whipped the karate twins for coughing. "I'm not judging you," she said. "But you're watching," he replied. This time, she smiled. Not a warm smile. A proud one. The galaxy watches you now. They just don't know it yet. 10 minutes later, they reached the communications bay. The Rex's systems were older than most living slavers had ever seen, but impossibly advanced. Tech not forged, but whispered into existence by minds a war had long since buried. Arya activated the main console with a single palm swipe. Holographic glyphs surged around them. Kale stepped forward. "Let me." She nodded. He typed in silence, fingers a blur of confidence and familiarity. Not the clumsy strikes of a child, but the precision of someone who trained every night since the age of 6. Encryption Omega. Burst beacon. 10-sector echo. He paused. "Are you sure about this?" She didn't answer with words. She placed her hand on his shoulder and gently turned him to face her. "This isn't just about vengeance anymore. This is the start of something louder. You know what happens when you speak our name." Kale nodded. Arya gave a rare, full smile. "Then say it." Kale leaned forward and spoke into the console. "My name is Kale Draven. You took me. You sold us. You broke our bones and laughed while we bled. But you forgot what Dravens do. You forgot what happens when you hurt our kind. We're coming now, and we're not hiding anymore." He pressed the broadcast trigger. The signal exploded into the void like a scream wrapped in starlight. Sector 12, the Halon Fringe, a trade hub run by warlords and smugglers. Brutal, chaotic, unbothered by law. The transmission hit a pirate market there within minutes. By hour's end, 1,000 eyes had seen it. By the next day, it had burned across 6 systems. And in its wake, something woke up. Old flags, old debts, old names once spoken in fear now muttered in reverence or dread. Draven, not a boy, not a woman, an idea. And ideas, once freed, are harder to kill than gods. The slaver network scrambled. In the Red Ring, an alliance of flesh merchants, war brokers, and species traders, a crisis was declared. At a meeting deep within the floating black citadel of Ashka Vault, a circle of warlords argued around a hologram of Kale's face. "Just a child," spat one. "We kill him, end the legend." "That's what they said about Arya 20 years ago," hissed another. "How'd that turn out?" "Deploy assassins. Wipe the family name clean again. Salt the bloodline." A silence fell. One of the warlords leaned back, mechanical fingers clicking. "You think that's a real son?" No answer came, because deep down, They all knew the truth. Who else would dare to broadcast that name? Back aboard the Vantra's Rex, Kale couldn't sleep. He sat on the floor of the weapons bay, examining the components of a plasma rifle. His eyes weren't on the gun, though. They were on the stars. You said they'd come for me, he said without turning. Arya stood in the doorway, arms crossed. They will. How many? She shrugged. All of them. He nodded. Then, after a long pause, good. They reached Erebus Station 4 days later, or what was left of it. Orbiting Saturn's shadow, the station was once a proud hub for Terran science and deep space colonists. Now it was a carcass. Half the habitat rings had been blown out, and its signal beacon pulsed weakly, like a dying heartbeat. Kale walked its ruined halls in silence. This was where he had been born, where he had learned to speak, to crawl, to code. Now only scorched walls and floating corpses remained. In one corner of the old security office, he found a blood-smeared drawing stuck to the wall, a child's scrawl of a tall woman holding a boy's hand beneath 2 stars. He peeled it off and said nothing. As they left, Arya gave the order. Detonate the core. Make it clean. Kale hesitated. We're erasing it. No, she replied. We're burying it with fire. No one gets to pick at its bones. He pressed the trigger. The station vanished in a sphere of white fire. Back in the ship, Arya laid out the next names, the next locations, the next targets. But Kale held up a hand. Wait! There's one more place first. She frowned. Where? He turned slowly, voice cold and sharp. Where they train the buyers, the bidding academies, the auction sun. That's where they break the children before sale. Arya's jaw clenched. Kale's voice didn't tremble. I want it gone. Across the galaxy, whispers became shouts. In hidden corners of resistance cells, old war heroes looked up and smiled. On slave planets, the name Draven began to appear scratched into walls. In the underworld, bounty prices skyrocketed, for both Arya and Kale. And in the hidden data networks of slaver fleets, something terrifying began to appear again and again. A simple glyph. Not a word. Not a warning. A mark. Skull and crossbones, D skull and crossbones. On the edge of the Draken Rift, a small merchant vessel picked up the last echo of Kale's broadcast. The captain, a scarred old human with synthetic lungs, stared at the signal for a long time. Then he turned to his crew and said quietly, Tell the others. It's real. She's back. And the boy's worse. Back on the Rex, Kale sat at the command interface. He watched stars slide by, fast and endless. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. He just whispered one word. Burn! There's a place in the galaxy where even nightmares are sold for profit, where children scream into soundproof voids, where power is not earned, but auctioned. That place is called the Auction Sun. Not a star, not truly. It's an artificial construct, an orbital market city tethered to the remnants of a collapsed sun, glowing with artificial firelight. It orbits nothing but wealth and cruelty. Here, emperors bid with planets. Warlords trade species like dice. And at the heart of it all, beneath 300 levels of glittering vice and invisible violence, lay the deepest pit, the break room, where children are turned into silence. The Vantress Rex dropped from slipspace with no signal, no flare, no warning. Just presence, like a blade sliding under a throat in the dark. Inside the ship, Kale stood before the black armory mirror. His hand shook, but not from fear, from control, holding it back. Behind him, Arya observed in silence. She finally spoke. This isn't just another raid. The Auction Sun isn't a slaver pit. It's a pit. It owns governors. It sells the kingdoms. Kale didn't look at her. And it's going to bone. You could die. He turned now, and his voice was steel. Then I'll die screaming in their faces. But I won't let them do this to anyone else. Not again. She nodded. Then we do it your way. Infiltrating the Auction Sun was considered impossible. 1 million security nodes. AI guardians laced with psychic sensors. Mind readers, emotion sniffers, DNA-triggered checkpoints. But Arya Draven wasn't a thief. She was a former buyer. Decades ago, In a different life, she'd walked these halls with a face full of fire and a name the auction feared. She knew every entrance, every pulse in its system. What they didn't know was, she never left empty-handed. They thought she'd gone rogue. They didn't know she'd become the war. They entered through a civilian freighter code spliced to look like a pleasure cruiser. Ko posed as a junior attendant. Arya wore a glamour field that distorted her features into an exotic, high-ranking buyer from the Gore cartel. They passed 3 security scans, 1 biometric filter, 1 empathy sweep, and then entry. The auction opened before them like a cancerous flower. Gold light, screams beneath the base, holograms flickering, flesh on platforms, clothed in sorrow, bidders in masks lounged on clouds of steam. Vials of extinct blood were offered on platinum trays. Kale's jaw tightened. These people are monsters. Arya's voice was bitter. No, monsters just hunt. These are civilized. That's worse. As they moved deeper, they reached the vaulted ring, the inner circle of elite bidders. Access was restricted, locked by neural code. But Kale had prepared. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a black chip. Got it from the mind of the slaver I fried, he said flatly. The chip pulsed. Arya smiled, a rare gleam in her eye. You learn quickly. You trained me to. The vaulted ring was a cathedral of cruelty. Beneath its dome ceiling, high-ranking buyers sat in silent circles, masked, floating in antigrav chairs, watching. A stage rose from the center. And then they brought her out. A girl, no older than 7, half human, half Ruthari, thin, beautiful, terrified. Kale flinched. For a moment, he was back in his cell again. Chained, alone. And then he wasn't. He was standing. He was walking toward the stage. Protocol breach, one of the masks hissed. Security to platform, a voice barked. Kale ignored them. His voice rang like a siren. Her name is not for sale. Gasps, panic. The auction paused like a hell breath. Then, chaos. 2 guards lunged. Arya moved first. Her hands snapped, literally snapped, their necks in one fluid motion. Blood sprayed against crystal. Kale jumped to the stage, took the girl in his arms, shielded her, and then he looked at them all, the buyers, the cowards in masks, and said, You're all about to learn what it costs to buy innocence. All across the auction sun, systems began to fail. Power surged, cut, surged again. Lights flickered. One by one, holograms melted into static. And then, the feed began. On every wall, every terminal, every personal device. Kale's face, his broadcast, the message, the name, Kale Draven. That name exploded like a supernova inside the auction's core. Panic. Bidders ran. Guards turned on each other. AI systems shut down from emotional override. Too late. The trap had already been sprung. In the engine ring, Draven insurgents poured out of hidden compartments. Former slaves, ex-soldiers, rogue AIS, all loyal to one thing, the Draven cause. They slaughtered the guards with precision. Kale handed the girl to Arya and drew his sidearm. Then he headed for the break room. The break room was 6 levels down, shielded by neural gates and pain walls. Kale hacked through the first, walked through the second, burned through the third. At the 4th, he paused. 3 guards, 1 handler, all armed. Kale didn't flinch. He stepped into the corridor and raised his hands. Hi, he said. You chained me once. They sneered. He activated the neural pulse in his glove. The entire hallway screamed. Inside the break room, over 50 children stared up as the lights returned. Kale kicked down the final door. Get up, he said. You're free. No cheers, just wide, stunned eyes. Then, one by one, they stood, and they followed him out. Upstairs, Arya had the auction sun control AI in a neural cage. You're not supposed to be here, it sputtered. She leaned close. I burned entire sectors for saying that. She crushed the core with her bare hand. By the time the last Draven dropship arrived, the auction sun was dead. Its core imploded, not by bomb, but by choice. Kale stood on the escape platform with the children behind him. Arya approached. her armor scorched, one eye bleeding. He looked at her. It's not enough. No, she agreed, but it's a start. As the Vantress wreck soared into space, the auction sun broke apart behind them. Kale watched it burn, and whispered, one by one, every buyer, every seller, every name. Arya touched his shoulder. They'll come after us. Kale didn't blink. I want them to. They called it a war, but wars are declared. This wasn't declared. This arrived, like judgment. The galaxy didn't realize it had already begun bleeding until it tried to scream and found its throat cut. It started with the auction sun, then the mining moons of Drexelfall, then the breeding colonies of Varkis Prime. One by one, the cornerstones of the slave economy crumbled, not from above, but from within, from a name, Draven, not whispered now, not feared in the dark, shouted, painted on ruined walls, carved into the foreheads of dead traffickers, a name that meant flame, vengeance, and impossible hope. And behind it all, a boy, a ghost they chained, thinking him soft. Inside the Vantress wrecks, the war room pulsed with strategy maps and encrypted streams. Kale stood at the center, older, not in years, just weeks, but in the eyes. Those eyes had seen children pulled from coffins and guards torn apart by liberated mobs. He'd watched noble families sold to the very people they once branded. He'd lit fires he never thought he'd dare to dream of. He was no longer a boy in chains. He was a general of ghosts. Arya stood beside him, studying his face. You haven't slept? Kale didn't reply. They are rallying, she said. The Slava Kings. They've reactivated Project Cleaver. Kale's eyes flicked. I thought that was just a myth. It was. Now it's a last resort. What is it? Arya looked away for a moment, then back. You. Kale stared. They cloned me. No, she said. They broke you, a version of you. Same DNA, raised in simulation, fed pain and darkness, trained as a weapon they wanted, emotionless, controlled. A mirror. Arya nodded. And now they're sending it to kill you. Project Cleaver was more than a threat. It was a message. The Red Ring, the last alliance of slaver lords, genetic monarchs, and war-engineered fleets, had realized one truth. If they didn't erase the boy, the Empire would drown in the blood he set loose. They met on the hollowed ruins of Kefra 6, once a pleasure world, now ash. Draven ships landed first. A single figure stepped out. Kale. No armor. No army. Just rage. The opposing ship opened. Smoke spilled. And there, across the broken obsidian field, came the other, the mirror. Same face. Same frame. But colder. Eyes hollow, like planets with no sun. Around them, 1,000 drones formed a dome. No escape. No interference. A duel for the fate of the movement. Broadcast silently to every system where slavers still breathed. They circled each other. You're me, Kale said. The mirror tilted its head. I'm better. Your weakness. Your attachment. Your mother's guilt wrapped in meat. Kale smiled grimly. You're late to the party. He moved first. The fight wasn't like anything the galaxy had seen. Not martial. Not elegant. Not even calculated. It was feral. Two predators tearing at each other like the universe owed them blood. Plasma knives hissed. Bones cracked. Sand turned red. Halfway through, the mirror slammed Kale into a broken tower. You think names matter, he snarled. They matter when they scare people like you. Kale spat. The mirror hesitated. Do you even know why she vanished all those years? Kale's face froze. She made me, in secret, after you were taken. She needed a version she could control. Lies. Maybe. But truth was more dangerous when it felt like poison. Kale screamed and lunged. The fight turned brutal. Knives lost. Fists flew. Teeth shattered. The field burned. In the end, it came down to one moment. The mirror over Kale, pinning him, blood running into Kale's eyes. I win, he growled, because I'm not afraid to die. Kale's hand slipped into his boot. He pulled the last neural dagger. I'm not afraid to kill. He stabbed upward, straight through the mirror's heart. The clone gasped once, then fell sideways, twitching. Kale sat there, breathing, watching himself die. The world around him returned slowly. The drones evaporated. Above, the Rex descended. Arya sprinted across the field, knelt beside him. "He said you made him," Kale whispered. She didn't answer. "Did you?" Still no answer. He looked at her. Blood, dust, silence between them. "You don't need to lie." Arya's lips tightened. "I needed insurance," she admitted. "In case I couldn't get you back. In case they broke you beyond repair." Kale nodded once. No anger, just cold knowing. "I'm not him." "No," she said. "You're worse." Then she smiled. Thank the stars. 1 week later, they reached the Ring Citadel, the last slaver stronghold. It was said to be untouchable. Ringed by 50 war satellites, guarded by fleet-born giants engineered from the DNA of fallen gods. They got through in 20 minutes. Kale led the charge. Not with armies, just the liberated. The children, the broken, the healed. He unleashed them. And the ring broke. Every corridor became a grave. Every throne became a crucible. And when Kale reached the final hall, the War Council chamber where lords once bid for newborns, he stood over the last one, a woman in golden robes. She wept. "Please," she said. "Mercy." Kale looked down. "Do you remember what mercy sounded like when we begged for it?" She nodded. "Then you understand." He pulled the trigger. The galaxy didn't erupt in applause. There was no cheering, no parade, just stillness. A weight lifted. A breath held for centuries, finally released. Weeks later, they gathered the survivors on Vesta Hollow, a neutral zone where freeborn and freed alike mingled. Kale stood before thousands. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He simply raised the old chains, the ones that once bound his wrists, and dropped them to the date. "Never again," he said. A roar echoed across the stars. Later, in the quiet of the ship, Arya approached. "You did it." Kale looked out the viewport. "No," he said. "We started it." She placed something in his hands. His old ID tag, burned, but readable. "Keep it," she said, "to remember where you began." He turned it over. On the back, something was etched now. A single word, Draven.